All right, perfect. So then, Michael, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll start with some introductions on who the panelists are. So if you,
Okay, well, I'll
yeah,
start
perfect.
it
Go
if you
ahead, start,
want.
Pam.
I am Pamela Skilling. Some of you have seen me in the videos on Big Interview. I'm a co-founder of Big Interview, of course, and the head career coach here. Very excited to be joining the webinar today, and very, very excited to have these resume experts joining us as well to share their perspectives on this very interesting topic. And I'll let them introduce themselves.
Not sure we're going clockwise or columns, but yeah, okay, I can go next. I'm Michael Tomaszewski, a difficult last name to pronounce. And I've been a certified professional resume writer for the past 8 years already, working with individual clients, mostly in tech, marketing, and sales. I work with a couple of career advice companies as well as a career advice writer and an editorial consultant.
I can go next. My name is Trisha Buscemi. I'm an interview consultant, job search strategist, and a former IT recruiter. I have over 15 years of experience recruiting everything from C-suite positions to interns. I've worked quite a bit with college interns, and I'm passionate about helping them with their job searches. So that's one of the things I'm excited to help advise folks on today.
Okay, yeah, I'm Shelley Piedmont. I am a career coach and a former recruiter. I did recruiting for, oh gosh, probably about 20 years, everything from small businesses to Fortune 100 companies. And my focus is really helping job seekers understand the job search process so that they can get the jobs that they really want.
Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves. And also, I'm Brianna. I'm your moderator today. I work in the content team at Big Interview. We also have Summer here that's going to be making an appearance a little bit later, going over kind of some tools that you already have access to with Big Interview that will help with all of this. But I think we can go into the first slide here, which is debunking ATS myths. So for this, we're going to get the conversation started by just going through a list of some questions that are related to common myths. So I'll start out with one that is related to how much ATS is really used and what percentage of companies do you think use ATS systems for first run resume evaluations? Whoever wants to start.
Okay, so I think the main problem with ATS is how it's misunderstood. And I think a lot of people assume that whenever a company, be that for internal purposes or a recruitment company that works with other companies and helps find talent. So the assumption is that whenever ATS is in use, this is where some bots will be scanning your resumes before they reach human beings. And I think that, like, as career writers, we are partly responsible for this myth because it gives the feeling of the drama. Like, you need to get your resume on point because otherwise it will not even reach a human being. And then there are all those statistics about the percentage of companies that use ATS in general. In general, that's possibly around 99% of Fortune 500 companies. I would say that overall ATS is pretty much used by every company over 50 employees. But the thing is that even a system that helps group candidates into certain positions that are being open or closed, a system that helps automate communication with the candidates, basically something that makes life easier for HR teams, it's already an ATS. So a 30-person startup that's currently hiring for a lot of positions will use some sort of applicant tracking software, because that's what it is, to keep everything organized so that their HR team has all the contact details of the candidates in one place. That's already an ATS. But at the same time, and especially with smaller companies, it's very likely that resume reviews don't happen through ATS. It probably still reaches the HR partner at first, sometimes even directly the hiring manager. So in terms of what percentage of companies use ATS, in general, definitely most companies. For resume scanning per se, I don't think it's possible to say, but definitely not as much as the internet in general would have you believe.
I would add that as well with, I think, when you think about the assumption that an ATS is automatically disqualifying candidates before a human being views a resume, that might be as a result of some of the deal breakers. Maybe it's availability or location requirement. Those are hard and fast things that can't be gotten around. So there might be an auto-generated response to people who don't answer those deal breakers the way the ATS system is meant to recognize it. But after that, I mean, most of the system will rank things based on the most keywords that are found in a resume that match a job description, but doesn't mean I still didn't look at every resume that came through.
And I would add that I really don't like the advertisement that some people do in our industry that you can beat the ATS. It's not about beating the ATS. It's about understanding how an ATS works and making sure not only in your resume and your application that you're being strategic and smart about what you're submitting so that you are going to be showing up the best that you can. But there's no way to beat the ATS as it's been advertised. And so when people use those terms, it does bring a lot of fear to people. And I think that is something that we should try to debunk, because I think people get paralyzed by thinking about the ATS and not just, oh, I just need to do things in a smart way to make sure that my application is going to show up the best.
Absolutely. And something that we talked about in the previous webinar that relates to this specific myth is that a lot of times candidates will be immediately rejected and they think it's because of the ATS, but it was actually due to knockout questions. And that's something that we also got questions about, was actually knockout questions. And one in specific was, how do knockout questions work for salary screening? And especially for a student, if they are trying to avoid being screened out, but still want a salary that might be a little bit higher, what the advice is basically to approach that salary screening.
Well, first of all, definitely never put in a salary that's below what you can live off. Just don't ever do it. That's the basic piece of advice. Whether or not you will be screened out because of salary expectations that are higher than whatever bracket, that depends on how the company set this up. But at the end of the day, if the company cannot afford to pay you the minimum that you need to afford living, well, that wouldn't be a match anyways.
And I would just add that being smart about doing research and understanding what that particular position pays in that locality, that's really important, because there's variations even for the same title among different, cities. So understanding what would be the going rate for that particular location, that title, whatever experience they're asking for, and then looking at that range and understanding what you would be interested in making that actually fits in there. It's if you can put in a range, if that is allowed, that's usually the best practice to do. But sometimes they will just ask for a dollar amount. And if it's required, then that's what you have to work with.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of those. Definitely not good to put anything lower than something that you can live off of. The other questions about ATS myths that we saw were very related to formatting and the way that a resume is designed and how potentially this could cause issues with being rejected. So I have a few different variations of questions that we can go through. So the first one is certain fonts, colors, or design elements. Will something like that make a difference in whether or not a resume gets accepted or automatically rejected?
I think it's harder for the application systems to read those for sure. My thoughts on a resume is, keep it elegant but simple, readable. It's a selling document. You're trying to get your foot in the door for an interview. And you need to hide, it's the content of the resume that matters the most. And fancy graphics and especially like photos, they can be very hard for the systems to process. And there's nothing wrong with, text that's written in a concise way and highlights your qualifications for the role. And hopefully you're qualified for whatever it is you're applying for. But, um, I think that, yeah, fancy isn't always better.
And I
Yeah,
would always, I'm sorry, I would just add that you have two readers. So you have the ATS bot reader, and then you have ultimately the human reader. So you always have to think about what you're doing with both readers in mind. And oftentimes having something that is extremely graphically designed um, is a lot of noise for the human reader and for the ATS, and it can be distracting when that reader really is just trying to understand the content.
And I think that's just that we'll come back to that probably over and over again, which is that the things that will help you with the ATS will also help you with the human reader. So the things that you're doing to make your resume stand out are going to be similar, and both in terms of formatting, but also in terms of the keywords that you're choosing and how you're featuring your content. But yeah, it's ultimately that human reader that is going to decide whether to pick up the phone and call you in for an interview.
yeah, and let me just say, so 10 years ago, columns, colors, weird fonts could have been a problem. It's extremely unlikely that this will be a problem today, as long as the resume has a text layer to it. So if the resume is not an image, in which case it cannot be scanned, it's usually going to be fine. Like the two ATS systems that I work with most commonly, they properly parse really weird resumes, but maybe that's just a personal preference. But my word of advice would be keep your resume nice and simple, and you'll definitely be good to go then.
I couldn't agree more.
And as far as format, do you think that a PDF is the safest option, or do you think all formats are acceptable?
PDF is the safest option, but not by order of magnitude. All formats are pretty much acceptable. PDF still the safest.
Yeah, at most ATS, when you go to upload your file, it will tell you what file types are acceptable. And so if that ATS says it's acceptable, that should be fine. I mean, they're testing it for various file types. Um, so, I mean, the difference is your PDF is going to keep looking nice. You're not going to have any weird formatting with that, which is nice for the human reader. Uh, your Word document tends to be just a little bit easier sometimes for ATS to parse. But as Michael said, it's generally not a big difference.
And we did have a question clarifying that if two-column resumes are easily parsed to confirm that.
They should be parsed. With modern ATS, I would be shocked to see them not parsed properly. But again, to stay on the safe side and on the more visually pleasing side, that's a personal preference. I would skip the two columns.
And I'm going to add something about the two columns, which is lots of times the templates for two columns will have the experience on the right-hand side of those two columns. But think about how people read. We read left to right. So what tends to happen is people, the what the recruiters are really looking for is on that right-hand column, but they will naturally want to look at the left-hand column because they're reading left to right. And so oftentimes the placement of the information in that two-column format really should be your experience should be on the left-hand side because that's what the recruiters first want to read. Your contact information, some of that other stuff should be on the right-hand side because it's less important material.
That's a good point. I mean, think about as a, human resume reviewer, you're looking at dozens, if not more than 100 resumes at a time, in a given day, and you only spend so many seconds on it. Make it easier. Don't it fatigues my eyes. Like, make it easy for me to find the detailed in content, the information I'm looking for that matches the requirements of the job. It's as simple as that. It's a lot of energy and effort put into making resume templates look flashy, but again, it's the content that matters the most.
Absolutely. And something we got a couple questions actually about if they're applying to creative fields, if that suddenly changes. I will actually say, as someone who works in marketing that has reviewed many, many resumes and for design roles as well, I do not believe that it makes or breaks someone's application. In fact, I've never made a hiring decision based off of someone's design elements on someone's resume. It's only been their qualifications. I would much rather make sure that I get their resume, it's easily structured, I can read it, and then them send a portfolio that actually shows their design skills, I think is way more impactful than just using one of the extreme resume templates that we've all seen. But curious to know if anyone else has anything to say about that, but that's always been my experience with the creative industries.
Anecdotal evidence, the most beautiful resume I've ever seen came from a UX UI designer. It was a black font on a white document. The font pairing was beautiful. The proportions were amazing, but it would still look great as a resume for a law firm.
Yeah. I was going to mention Bree's back tattoo format resume that
Yes.
she encountered, and then how that's definitely not going to work in the ATS though.
Yes, I can't remember what, I think it was a design position that was that when someone submit their resume to us in a format of a back tattoo. It was an image of a back tattoo, and it was the ink was the resume. It was the most interesting resume I've ever seen, but we did not hire that person. It just, of course, got shared in our Slack channel. All right, well, I think we can move on then to the next slide. We've made it through a good amount of myths there. And now we're going to be talking more about how recruiters actually use AI and ATS day to day. So we'll go in basically with, I think we can start with the difference between AI and ATS and what you all have seen in your experience.
The difference is that ATS is a piece of software and AI is a technology. So it's kind of like, well, that's the difference. Some ATS will use AI, some will not. Similarly, how some ATS will use a certain programming language and how they're coded, and some will not. So these are definitely not synonymous. Um, there is ATS software out there that integrates AI and uses AI currently. There's still some that does not. But yeah, that's comparing apples and
It's
pears.
always the company's choice as well. Just because an ATS system does have that capability, that is still up to the company and even down to the level of that recruiter, that hiring manager, in terms of what the settings are going to be for that particular role and whether to use AI and how to use it. So it does vary quite a lot.
And I will say that a lot of the ATS companies, they're advertising AI, but how the recruiters are actually using it, it's more cautiously than you might think, and even major employers, because they want to ensure that the AI actually is going to do what it says it's going to do and not have negative impact on them. So many are kind of doing baby steps, which is taking AI and using it in some areas that were more manual. As an example, AI can be used to set up interviews. And so that is something that many people, many organizations are using AI for, that we don't, as candidates, we don't even think about that. Or they're using AI to do sourcing. So finding candidates that can be internal within their applicant tracking system or even external. They can use AI in that way. So, and it's going to vary depending on the organization and what their goals are and how comfortable they are, as well as how robust the AI is for that particular ATS vendor. So that's why it's currently, you can't say everyone is doing a certain thing, because that's not really the reality.
And related to that, we also talked a little bit about how AI and or ATS tools will use something that is either auto ranking or a suggested candidates from a list. And people want to know, do you think that's used quite frequently? Are people trusting that information, or is that something that is that not a final decision?
I would say, it might rank it, but you're still looking at every resume. You can't rely on that as the only source of information that decides whether or not someone moves forward to an interview from an application. Um, you know, it's ranking a lot based on the best match of the job, which a human reviewer would do as well, if they could do it as quickly as the system can. But each resume does, my experience, get looked at.
And so I can say, based on when I was a recruiter and the ranking, um, so it can work, but oftentimes it doesn't work, kind of what you think. And I'll just give you an examples where the highest ranked person was not somebody that I would be interested in. Okay, so the system thought they were a great fit, or the highest ranking fit, but when I looked at the resume, I'm like, no, not that doesn't what we're looking for. And sometimes it would be those candidates that were lower ranked when I looked at the actual resume and their information that I could tell was a better fit for my organization. So
I couldn't
that was my experience when I was doing recruiting. I couldn't trust the ranking. What I would use it for, and I didn't always use it, but when I did, it would be just to prioritize who I would be looking at first and kind of working down the list.
I couldn't agree more. Even with older systems, speaking as a hiring manager now, I don't remember hiring a single candidate that would be automatically ranked as the best. And at the same time, I think companies are open to experimenting with AI. The end goal is to hire the best fit as quickly as possible. So if I have AI that I experimented with and I see the difference in metrics that it cut the time in the time I took to find the perfect candidate for the role, of course I would use it. Is that kind of AI available now? I don't think so.
Agreed. As someone who is also actively hiring, I think that these tools just they don't have exactly, they're not ready for that quite yet. They do their best with suggestions, but it's more exactly what Shelley said. It's kind of a starting point, but it's not something that at least I personally, as a hiring manager, I'm not only going to look at those resumes because that would be a huge loss. Basically. One other thing we wanted to touch on here on how recruiters really use either AI or ATS software is the difference between basically the range of uses of this between small companies, enterprises, or even by industries. What have you all noticed?
I can only speak about industries that I specialize in. So yeah, mostly technology, marketing, and sales. The main difference is the bigger the company, usually the more applicants they get, and the more they can benefit from some sort of automation. Smaller companies that get 50 to 100 applications per role, I think that it wouldn't be much of a time saver, really, to have AI swift or like sort through resumes. You'd still want to double check that with a human eye. I also mostly work with candidates applying to technological startups. So this is where, yeah, I honestly don't think that the risk of having bots rank your resume and then having the hiring manager trust that is very high. Um, it might be more prevalent with enterprise companies. But again, just think of what the goal of the company always is. It's to find the best candidate possible. So they will lean on ATS and certain uses of AI to automate mundane tasks and save time and save costs that way more frequently than smaller companies. But again, cannot stress that enough. It's if you're applying to Coca-Cola, it does not mean that it will all be bots dealing with your job application.
I think it's also important to point out, an ATS is applicant tracking system. And, I think some people sometimes want to just be able to submit a resume directly to a person, but you want your information on file with the company because especially if you're applying to a large organization like a Coca-Cola, for example, maybe you're not the right fit for the job you've actually applied for, but then you're in the system and that's where AI can come into play in the applicant tracking system where maybe it does an initial search for a job before it's even posted and your information's already there and they'll reach out to you. So while it might seem sometimes tedious for, you submit a resume, but then you also have to fill out the application in the ATS for that company. It's worth spending the time doing that to get your info in the database so that maybe you can be hired for something else in the future.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I'm not sure if that's the right moment, but it's something I really wanted candidates and career advisors to be aware, especially with bigger companies. So the deal with ATS is usually if a company uses a given ATS, it uses it for all recruitments that they run. So once you apply for a position, you usually have your not an account, but a profile created in this ATS that's associated with your email address, contact details, and stuff like that. Where it might get problematic is when people start spamming applications around. And it happens in this job market where people are frustrated and they apply to hundreds and thousands of jobs, and they will apply to several jobs with the same company. This is what can get you in trouble, because if you apply for a senior and an entry-level position, and then a fake scenario, someone applies to an entry-level candidate applies to an administrative role, a customer success role, and also a junior sales role. This is where it will get tricky, because then you might confuse the system, because they will not really know how to kind of classify you. You will look like a bot, basically. So yeah, especially with companies that have many, sometimes hundreds of positions open, and it might feel tempting to apply to multiple positions. Yeah, this is where it might be problematic. So just it is important to be purposeful in your applications.
I couldn't agree more with that. Apply to the jobs you're qualified for. That's the best advice.
Absolutely. And then the next thing that we don't have a ton of time to talk about this, and it's not it's not the exact topic, but I do think it's important to cover really quickly, and we can even do a longer event specifically about this if people are interested. But Michael, if you want to go to the next slide, we can talk about job application strategies, and specifically related to this and exactly what we talked about. We discussed ATS and how sometimes even if even if it's a small company, if it's a big company, there's a lot of companies using ATS, especially like Michael said, if you're over 50 employees, the chances are everyone's using an ATS. The issues that I've at least seen as a hiring manager now, most companies do put jobs on LinkedIn. And previously, before AI, you would get maybe 100 people that apply to your job, and that was it. Now, even as a small company, you will get hundreds, if not thousands, of job applications thanks to LinkedIn's Easy Apply. And that makes it more difficult for employers to search through all these applications. And that's what leads to all these issues of them trusting the LinkedIn AI for top candidates. And they don't get to the great candidates that might be in their list. So, one of the things that we'd like to talk about today, very briefly, we only have a few minutes for this slide, is according to you all, what are some other good job application strategies that would not include easy applying on a tool like LinkedIn?
Go to the company site, apply it through the company site, I guess is the suggestion I would give.
Network. See if you know anybody that works at that company, and maybe be able to make an introduction to a hiring manager.
Network a lot. Yeah, at the same time, an important note, especially for entry-level candidates, I guess, but for everyone, even if you have a connection, I mean, it's great if you have a connection. It's great if you get a referral. This is how the best jobs are filled. And I really encourage people to engage with other people in their industry via LinkedIn or forums. I do believe that this is how the best jobs are found. At the same time, even if you have a direct connection with the hiring manager or even the CEO, to stay on the safe side, go through the automated process, leave your resume there. If you have a great referral and a great connection, it's not like you will not get hired because you didn't fill out the application form, but still do it. It will be easier for HR to find you. You will most likely be their top priority for filling this position, but just follow the rules. And yeah, and in the application form, don't just click random stuff because you have a gut feeling that you're getting in anyways. Just do it to make everyone's lives easier.
And I will just mention that the ATS is often also associated with onboarding. So your offer letters and all your onboarding. So you can't skip not being in there because that will trigger, if you're hired, other things. And many organizations, because they need to have everybody in the system, and sometimes that's for reporting purposes, also for government, that you are going to be asked to make sure you have your information in. You can still reach out to everybody that you know and networking. And then you would just mention, I have already applied for this job, because if you haven't, likely they're going to respond to you, have you applied for the job? Because that's always going to be the first step before they can move you forward.
Another resource might be your professors in the school. They know, people that work at top employers, and depending on the industry, I'm sure there's a broad range represented here of career counselors supporting students in all sorts of areas of study. But they sometimes have a good inside track to connecting people, hiring managers.
And
And finally, when you're looking for a job, let everyone know that you're looking for a job whenever you can. I'm not talking nepotism or anything like that, but you really never know whose spouse's cousin's uncle's friend is hiring for this exact position that you're looking for. So
I see a lot of students who are a little bit shy about it. It's new to them to go out there, and even sometimes their professors, their parents, their advisors are telling them, call this person, call that person, and it's out of the comfort zone, but it's a life lesson and a career lesson to be able to learn how to network and put yourself out there.
yeah,
I
do
can
this,
tell
add
you,
this open to work badge on LinkedIn, write that awkward post that you will feel bad about, let everybody know that you're looking and what your top skills are. Just literally let the whole world know that you're looking for a job and what job that is.
so I was just going to say, the person that cuts your hair, the person that, that waiter that or server that you've seen multiple times, that bartender, whoever, you never know who knows somebody, because especially people in service industries, they talk to people all day and they hear a lot of things. So I always encourage people, you're sitting with somebody, tell them. If they can help you, I'm sure that they will.
And related to this, I know Pam and I have talked about this before in previous events, but another thing specifically for all of our college career counselors that are here, our informational interviews for students are extremely impactful, and that's something that it is networking, but to them, it's not going to awkward events. It's really just sitting down with someone and getting to know what they do and hopefully building your network for either for immediately after you graduate or for later on in your career can be super helpful. Well, I think we can move on then to the next slide. Yes, so this is our last discussion question before we move on to the Q&A style section. So if we can just do a last round, if anyone has some tips on how students or job seekers can pass both AI and human reviews, now that we know from everything we've mentioned that most of the times these resumes are being reviewed by people as well as an AI or an ATS.
I would just reiterate what I said earlier, focus on the content, your qualifications, keep it simple. Um, put your top skills at the top of the resume. The real estate on the first page of your resume is very important. Where do you want people's eyes to go? Be chronological. Um, Answer all the questions I'm going to have in my head before I get a chance to ask them. If there's a gap in employment or something, maybe like that, just focus on the content and not the design as much.
I would suggest before applying to read that job description twice, if not 3 times, and just think about, okay, what is this job about? What does somebody have to do to be successful? Now, they're going to, hopefully, if it's a well-written job description, then they're going to have what are the role duties? So what would you be doing every day? And what are the requirements? What are they looking for? What is their success profile? Reading through all that, then as best you can, you want to have on your resume what aligns your background, your knowledge, your skills, whatever it is that aligns with that. And one suggestion I will always make is don't assume that the person reading your resume will automatically understand that. Put it in simple language, pretend that they don't know anything about anything you've done, and spell it out for them so that they can connect the dots. Too many people, and when they write their resume, they put what they want to put on their resume, and that's the wrong approach. That's the wrong strategy. It has to be what that employer needs to read to understand you're qualified for the job. There is a difference.
What I always tell my individual clients is a great resume only needs to get 3 messages across. Number one, I understand what you need for this role. Number two, I have done similar things in the past. Number three, I have been successful doing these things. And because if a hiring manager reads a resume that clearly shows that a candidate, first of all, understand the requirements, secondly, has done similar tasks in the past, and thirdly, has done them well, they'll obviously want to hire you. And that will also help you pass any AI or keyword screenings, yes.
And
I had one final thought that it's okay to have multiple versions of your resume and to adjust it based on the job you're applying for, as long as you're being truthful, of course. But your resume isn't just only one document you're married to for the rest of your life. You can make edits to it based on the job you're applying for each and every time.
And just quickly, I just want to add the reminder that for students, you probably don't have work experience in this exact job that you're applying for. So it's okay to highlight potential. They're looking for potential. They're looking for transferable skills. They're looking for professionalism, communication, whether you exhibited that as a lifeguard or a server or cleaning rooms in a hotel. It doesn't matter. It's showing these skills that you can apply to a job and be trained to do that job. And of course, showing your interest in that field is great too. But it's okay if you haven't done that job before. You have to break in somehow, and showing your potential is the way you're going to get there.
Absolutely. And I think we've gone through everything we need on this slide, and we can move on to Summer's part of showing basically what we've talked about today and how that works with the resume builder and resume AI that you all have access to. And then we'll move on to some Q&A. We already have some questions ready for that. And of course, please add your questions as they come in the chat.
Summer, do you want to steal my screen?
Yes, would love that. All right, wonderful. Thank you all. And everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. So for all of those that are joining that are current partners with us, we're excited to show you our updated resume builder. For many of you folks, you may not know that this is a feature that is already live. We just did a big update, which we're excited to show you. So what I'm going to walk through is what the new builder looks like. And then for those that are familiar with our resume AI, I will show you what that process looks like with the builder into the resume AI flow. So I'm just going to do a quick demo. I don't have too much time to walk you through, but I just wanted to give you a little sneak peek of what it looks like. So when you log in, you're going to come over here to Resume Builder. I will show you what it looks like when you click build a new resume, but then I'm actually going to utilize one that I've already created just for sake of time. But as you'll see here, we have different templates that the student can choose from. And when they choose one, they just click save, and then they will start from there. But as I mentioned, due to time, I'm just going to go ahead and work from one that I've already created, just to give you a little sneak peek. So one of the neat things about the new builder is, first off, as we were mentioning earlier, if a student wanted to tailor this to a specific job description, they can. So for example, you'll see here, I chose this inside marketing sales representative. We have preset job descriptions. So if I click preview, you're going to see here that this will automatically populate. Again, this is the job description that I'm going to use for building out my resume. But of course, if I'm a student and I already have that job description, I can simply pop it in here as well. And then it's just basically going to kind of walk me through each phase. So as we look here at contact information, for example, I'm going to put in any of my contact information. Of course, I can add in LinkedIn or X or personal website, whatever that might look like. As we go through on to the next step, summary statement. So first off, if a student does not want to have a summary statement, perhaps you don't recommend it, whatever that might look like, they can always skip it. But let's say I do want to have a summary statement, we will have presets here on the right. So these are just recommended summary statements. And the nice thing is that if I were to choose one, you'll see here that I could actually enhance it as well. So if I were to click improve with AI, maybe I want to add in some accomplishments. You'll see here that it will actually adapt it and make it a little bit more tailored specifically to the student. So again, they can kind of reword it. As you can see here, it's going to add in some key accomplishments here throughout it. So again, it's really going to enhance any of the information that the student is putting in. And we'll just basically kind of walk through each step. For education, as you can see here, it's going to break down each one of those categories. They can add any additional information about their education as well. Experience, so as we'll see here, if I were to edit this for an example, same concept. So on the right, if, for example, that's my previous role, I was a meeting convention planner. On the right, you're going to see here, these are some recommended jobs, tasks that I had within that profession. You can see here. And then the same concept goes. I can always improve with AI along the way. Now, one thing to note on this, if there's a university that we partner with or college and you are unable to have AI for whatever particular reason, we can always deactivate the improve with AI on the resume builder. So just wanted you all to know that we do work with a number of schools that don't really recommend AI. So again, we can always deactivate that improve with AI. Same concept with skills. So again, for this role inside marketing as sales representative, you're going to see here on the right here some recommended skills that I might have had. Certification, same concept. And again, we're just going to walk the student through each category. And when we finally get to the finalize step, if they want to add any additional sections, they absolutely can. So for those familiar with our previous builder, we were a little bit limited in terms of the sections. So we've added some additional sections. So if they wanted to add in their volunteer experience, for an example, or community service, they can always rename them as well. So there's a lot of flexibility with this new builder. And then when we finally get to the look and feel, if the student would like, they can always come in and adapt the heading font size, body font size, margin spacing, date format. And this is just kind of a sneak peek of what it looks like. And the student also has the ability to download it into a PDF or Word doc as well. So for all of those that knew our old builder, you are only able to download it into a PDF. So now you can also download it to a Word doc. And then if the student chooses to use a different template, once they get to this final stage, they can. We have different templates here that you can see here on the left. They can just kind of choose which one would fit the best. And so what happens is after they have completed their resume, as I mentioned, if you all have the resume AI feature, they can now seamlessly scan it into the system and get instant feedback via AI on that particular resume that they built within our builder. So if we come into the resume AI feature, let's say they come in, and for all of you that know our builder, they're going to choose a scoring guide. We'll choose this marketing one. I want to go ahead and put in a marketing job description that I've already populated. So you'll see here it'll automatically populate. And then as you can see here, instead of just uploading a resume, I can choose a resume. And when I choose my resume, this is going to pull directly from the builder and I can scan it directly into the system. So it's just going to create a very easy way for the student to build out a resume within the builder and then scan it into our resume AI. And then lastly, just a little sneak peek of what the resume AI looks like for all of you that are not familiar with it. When a student scans their resume, they're going to receive a feedback in basically 4 different categories. And when I click view detailed feedback, you're going to see here, these are the results. So on the right would be the resume, on the left will be the feedback, and you'll see here that we're just going to give them a breakdown of each different category, providing best practices along the way, AI feedback. And the beauty of this tool is it's highly customizable. So schools have the ability to tailor the scoring guide on the back end to really fit the needs of students, making sure that the students are meeting the requirements of the school. And again, just going to break down each category, giving detailed feedback. One of the nice things about the resume AI is we offer ATS fit. So you can see here, for example, keyword matching almost there. Keywords they have not matched up for in red, keywords they have matched up for in green. So in essence, matching the job description up to the resume and giving them detailed feedback here. Skills match, same concept. Skills they have not matched up for in red, skills they have matched up for in green. And then lastly with formatting. So this is going to look a little exaggerated, but as you can see here, it's going to break down font size, font style, margin spacing, date formatting, and so forth. So that's kind of a sneak peek of what the builder and the resume AI look like. Again, if anyone is interested in taking a look further, you all can reach out and more than happy to schedule a demo.
Thanks, Summer. And then we do have the Q&A section now. So we have a few minutes here to go through that. I do already have a list of questions that I had collected previously, as well as what we talked about today. But of course, if you have any follow-up questions, just add them in. If there are questions that we don't get to, I'll make sure that we get them answered and I will include them in the email, the follow-up email with the recording of the webinar as well. So you will be able to access them there. The first question that we had that we already had previously, and we had 2 other people ask about it as well in the chat, is specifically related to cover letters. And that is if a cover letter actually adds value and if it's processed by an ATS. So kind of double header on if you think people really read them, and if they are read, does it also go through an ATS?
Who wants to weigh in first on that one?
I will.
I'm not a big fan of cover letters.
Oh,
You are or not?
I am not. No. I mean,
Yeah.
some industries require them. And if the job description says submit one, then of course you want to do that. But if it doesn't ask for it, I wouldn't go out of my way to writing one up. I might be in the minority there though, but that's, it's a personal preference.
So I was going to add that as a former recruiter, I didn't generally read cover letters because I was focused on whether the person was qualified for the job. And that was my first thing. Now, if there was something in there that I had a question about, I might go to the cover letter to see if it was answered. But my experience was the people that are more interested in the cover letter is the hiring manager. because that's somebody for their team, that it's another piece of information. And so oftentimes they will want to read those just to get a sense of whether that person would be of interest to them. And the other part of why they might be more interested in it is they generally aren't seeing all the applications. So oftentimes a recruiter is screening them and then giving them, their recommendations. So the people that they're looking for is a lot less. So oftentimes they have a little bit more time to read those cover letters. One suggestion for cover letters, and partly why recruiters don't generally read them, is because people write them that in a way that is essentially the same information that is on the resume. And that's not worthwhile. You can just go to the resume and get that. So if you're going to write a cover letter, it should cover, why you were interested in this job, why would that be a good fit, and what special you bring that maybe you haven't talked about in the resume, or you want to talk about more or have a little bit more details about. That would be my suggestion of the content for it.
Yeah.
Pragmatically, I would say, well, first of all, yeah, if the job ad says cover letter required, yes, absolutely include a cover letter. Otherwise, 90% of the cases, I don't think a cover letter will make a difference. But a well-written cover letter will never, ever hurt. And it might just help. So if you're crazy interested in this job, why not try and boost your chances by the 10%?
Absolutely. All right. So we made it through those questions about cover letters. Let us know if you have any follow-up questions regarding that. But I think what everyone said here definitely nicely summarizes that. We also have a question related specifically more for the students who are applying to jobs, and that is, what are the top reasons that internship and entry-level resumes might fail an ATS screening or a resume screening in general?
Could you repeat, please?
Yes. What are the top reasons that internship or entry-level candidates their resumes would fail a resume screening?
I mean, it depends on if they don't meet the knockout questions or the basic qualifications of the job. Unfortunately, some people want to shoot for the moon. When you're entry level, it's challenge if you're applying for a higher level position than what you've actually got the skills for. I mean, it's sounds pretty common sense, but when you're a new grad and you're excited about getting into things and you see salary posted that looks really exciting, and you want to throw your hat in the ring, but you shouldn't be like shocked if it says 2 to 5 years of experience and you have 6 months or less, that you didn't get it, move on in the process.
Yeah, I would say that the only time when your resume will be automatically disqualified, but that holds true for all positions, is that like if you clearly do not match the basic requirements. So yeah, that can be 7 years of experience and you have 6 months. Maybe there's a certain certification that's required for a job and you don't have it. Maybe you need a master's degree or higher and you don't have it, then yeah, you will be disqualified. But other than that, nothing
One thing I would add
comes to
is
mind.
being too generic. So I see this a lot with clients who are applying for internships or entry level jobs, and they're pursuing a lot of different possibilities. And in their head, they're like, I could do this. This is something I could learn to do. I could be good at it. I have some of these skills. And so they just apply. And I think when the recruiter or the hiring manager sees it, they don't see any connection between the resume and the internship or the job. So I think it's really important to customize your resume and really think about how do you make it so that when the person is reviewing, the human and the ATS is reviewing your resume, they immediately see, why did you apply for this internship in particular, right? So that might involve customizing your summary section, just thinking about how you can make it clear why you're applying, even if you don't necessarily have a ton of experience.
And I think, Pamela, to your point earlier, highlighting the interpersonal skills you've gained from jobs that don't seem related to whatever it is you're applying for. Working with other people is a very valuable skill. And if you can demonstrate you've done that, and some people discount, I've worked with a lot of college students who, they had a restaurant job or something, worked in a retail store, like, well, I didn't put it on they bring it up in an interview, but then it's not on their resume. Like, why don't you put that there? Well, it's not related to this IT job internship I'm applying for. I said, well, you're going to be working with other people and you worked with people there. I mean, there's a lot of transferable skills from jobs and experiences, volunteering, being a team captain of a sport. I mean, if you're looking back, your high school wasn't that long ago, or if you're in sports in college, demonstrates, your character. And I think it's really important for career counselors to emphasize that with their students because they think they discount that experience, and you should take credit for it. It's something you should be proud that you've accomplished, and it, paints a picture of who you are.
Showing work ethic, reliability.
You showed up somewhere on time to keep a job for 6 months or longer, right?
100%.
And we got a follow-up question about that, which is about how do we feel about people basically putting in a laundry list of skills without giving any context, which I know I've seen plenty of, where especially students have this big bank of skills that they're taught to include, but then if you look at their actual experience, there's no information on how that's connected.
So yeah, the question says attributes. I don't know if like synonymous with skills. If we're talking attributes like personable, well organized, and 8 others like this, absolutely worthless to me. But if we're talking skills, especially in technology, yeah, knowledge of certain skills or protocols or certifications is required. And I do know that tech recruiters and hiring managers, it's an easy way for them to see like a list of yeah, just the tech stack that the candidate is familiar with. And if the job requires many, don't freak out about having like a list of 10 if all are really relevant. Soft skills, I'm not a fan of listing them in bullet points, that they should shine through everything else on your resume.
And that's where the human reader actually is really good because they can see communication skills and they can see problem solving and all those things in context, and they'll get it. They'll get it. So, and they're especially if you do not have a lot of work experience, but you can show these other skills in context, that's huge. Yeah.
And we have one last question here before we wrap up. Thank you for saying we have a few extra minutes over. But we'll make sure to send this recording out to anyone as well so people can see everything. But the last question we had is how do recruiters feel about candidates who are using AI to create their resumes and other application materials?
Well, I am in a lot of recruiter groups. And what we are hearing is totally AI generated resumes have a sameness to them that recruiters can tell right away. They're using the similar language and they're almost identical. And so that's not good if you're a candidate and the recruiter's like, oh, yeah, this is AI generated. I don't know if this is real, like this is your real stuff, or it's fake. So, my advice, I think AI can be a good, what I call a junior writer, which is it can help with the editing and it can give you ideas like research to what things that the hiring manager and the recruiter are looking for, but it should not be writing your resume wholesale. I think that works against you and not for you in the current environment.
Agree 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Also totally agreed. At the same time, there are AI tools, and I will not name drop, but there are AI tools that can genuinely help you with your resume. People in general do not write good resumes, and that's also a problem for recruiters. If you can use AI to help you tweak your truthful, but otherwise, I don't know, maybe misformatted, or
Bland.
perfectly worded resume, do it. Absolutely. But don't create a whole resume from scratch. It will be obvious instantly.
And I think another thing that is important to mention is it's now we're becoming more aware that AI is only as good as the information you feed it. And if you're just going in as a student and saying, I'm a, junior at this university, that this is, I had an internship in this and this, and then asking it to create a resume from scratch, it is not going to be good. But if you upload the correct information and you feed it something good, you will get a good base that then you can modify and use that as a starting point. And that's often, as someone who works in writing and that I've seen the impact that AI has had in writing, I think the best use cases for it is either to give you a starting point or to make corrections on something that you have already created. And I think that's the same with resumes that I've seen. If you do from A to Z, it's so clear which ones are the same, and especially with cover letters, which is also something that people asked with. This is crazy. You can immediately tell who has done this because almost every single cover letter will look the same unless they modify it and unless they feed it additional information or, like we said, create it first themselves and then ask AI to do a review of that is a completely different story. But it's been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I think we can wrap up. We definitely went over, but thank you all for staying with us. And big thank you to our panelists today. They gave us a ton of information. I am going to send some follow-up questions that we had mostly related to formatting that we didn't get to answer today. But I think basically what we've seen today is that we can see that although ATS is important, almost always a human does get to see your resume, and anytime a resume is automatically rejected, it is normally not because of just ATS. So that's definitely been something important to remember about today. And thank you everyone for coming. And then if anyone in our panelists wants to share any contact information, feel free to do so in the chat. Otherwise, you can reach out, of course, on LinkedIn as well. Everyone here has their LinkedIn accounts. That's it. Thank you all so much for coming.
Shelly, Trisha, Michael, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.